So we know you can't really compare Michael Schumacher to Lewis Hamilton as a greatest driver because there were different eras. There was a crossover, but different phases. But people are always wanting to sort of look at how the certain generations compare. How would you respond to the general public on that?
Oh, well, I think that's a difficult one. But I mean, Michael in his time, and I raced against him. I was in the same team.
He was teammate,
yeah. He was special, and he was motivated, and he was fit, and I think he was very fast, and the same with Lewis. But I think not, that you not really can, who's the better one, or would you say who had more luck to drive the fastest car at that time? Both had, Yeah. I think Michael created it more towards his liking, He took the people from Benetton to Ferrari, so it was basically a little bit the same team. And I think with Lewis, I mean, he made the right call to go to Mercedes at the right time. Nobody thought beforehand that he was winning 6 titles with them. And I think he's absolutely top driver, but he also had the top material.
So if we look away from this era and look back to the time before you were in Formula One, did you have a driver that stood out for you that either inspired you or you particularly followed, or it wasn't like that for you? You weren't
I think it was
fanboy?
more like Niki Lauda and Alain Prost.
Yeah, Prost was someone that I always thought he was very efficient in the way he drove. He did have a bit of a weight advantage at that time.
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
which
still has.
He still has. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
So you're out there actually racing with Lewis. Michael, you know his records from the past. You know how your father can explain how he drove. When you look at Lewis, now I know you fear nobody. You attack the track and you do the best with what you have. When you have the opportunity, you've shown that you can beat the Mercedes and you can beat Lewis. Are you able, as a competitor, to recognise publicly his strengths and his weaknesses, or you prefer just to look at him as another competitor?
Now, the weaknesses are a little bit more difficult because you're not in the same team. Because I'm pretty sure if you would be in the same team, then you will see the weaknesses. But of course, of course he has the best car. He still has a teammate to beat, which he is doing. But he's also, very consistent in what he is doing for a long time now. I think, he doesn't make many mistakes himself. He doesn't crash. He always takes the points home. So that is something which is very important, and he does that very well. So he's definitely one of the best ever in Formula One. Just not only just pure championship-wise or whatever, but in terms of consistency. You've seen some other drivers make some silly mistakes or whatever. He's not really doing that. So that makes him tough to beat because you cannot have a crash, or you have to be always on it. But on the other hand, you're always starting on the first row, so the chance of a crash is not that big, instead of being on the second or the third or even further behind to try and catch up. So that's also another thing. Because once you're on the lead or second, when you're so comfortably out front with a strong car, it's very hard to make a mistake.
So this was what Max Verstappen had to say about Lewis Hamilton, his arch enemy. Even he agrees that Lewis Hamilton is one of the best to ever do it. Despite this, Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes have still not signed a confirmation of an extension of his contract beyond 2020. The Lewis Hamilton Mercedes contract saga has been going on for far too long now. To state that there is a disagreement between the two parties would be an understatement. It's January and we still don't have any clarity on when the contract extension will be announced. Mercedes and Toto Wolff on their part can come out and say what they want about how the contract negotiations have been going according to the plan, and the announcement is imminent. It's becoming harder and harder to believe. What could be the sticking points is slightly predictable, as Lewis, a 7-time world champion, would command a certain sum of money, while Mercedes, with the advent of budget cuts in the 2022 regulations, might not be willing to pay such a sum on the driver, especially when that money could be used to make the car faster. The question though is that at this point, who holds the aces on the negotiation table? We try to find out what leverage each of Mercedes and Lewis could have as they try to end this stalemate. First of all, let's look at Lewis. Number 1. Lewis Hamilton is one of the best drivers on the grid. Lewis Hamilton is the winningest driver ever in the sport, As a 7-time world champion, he commands a certain sum of money that he thinks he deserves. More than that, he has time and again showed that even though he's driving the best car, the man behind the wheel is arguably one of the best, if not the best on the grid. Mercedes might have the best car on the grid, but if somehow the opposition manages to cut the gap, then you need someone of the caliber of Lewis to take the car to the championship. You need someone who could do what Lewis did at Turkish GP last season. Losing Lewis could mean losing that assurance, which could be a huge blow for Mercedes. Lewis brings with him the biggest fan base in Formula One. Lewis is not just a Formula One driver, he is a force of nature who has got his hands in multiple things. He has, he has his own fashion line, he has his own brand, and more than that, he's been vocal about issues around the world. Lewis's allegiance to the Black Lives Matter initiative was responsible for Mercedes changing the livery to black last season. Lewis has the most following on social media out of all the drivers on the grid, and what this also does is that it rubs off positively on Mercedes as well. Dropping Lewis, that too just before the start of the season, could lead to a lot of negative PR that is just not desirable in this day and age. Now let's look at what Mercedes has in hand when it sits on the negotiation table. First of all, Mercedes cars have been the class of the field since 2014. In what was a true indication of the extent of Mercedes' domination last year, George Russell stepped into the Mercedes on a short notice at Sakhir GP and went on to comfortably lead the race until Mercedes messed up his pit stop. And this was not even a surprise for many because such has been the domination of the Silver Arrows over the rest of the field in the last few years. Such has been the gap that Lewis has basically won all of his titles at Mercedes with a few races to spare. With budget cuts looming large in 2020 and driver salaries a part of it, Mercedes would be losing crucial millions that could be used to make the car faster if that money is eventually given to the driver. And secondly, in George Russell, they have a capable driver for the future. For a long time, George Russell has been hyped up as the driver of the future by Mercedes. At Sakhir GP, this was evident as Russell took the race lead from Bottas and never looked back. He should have won the race if not for a goof up at the pit stops by the Mercedes. In George Russell, Mercedes already has a driver who could, in essence, deliver what Lewis can do in the car. His performance at Sakhir was a clear indication of how good he can be even at short notice. Russell surely has potential and he would come at a bargain as compared to Lewis, in essence, saving millions of dollars for Mercedes that could be put into maintaining their advantage on the grid in future. Ultimately, the stalemate could end with one of the sides backing down. Lewis, on his part, will have to keep in mind that if he wants to be competitive in F1, there's no place better than Mercedes. While Mercedes, in their part, will have to understand that by banking on George Russell, they are still banking on an unknown quantity who has not yet proved himself. It's highly unlikely that Lewis, it's highly unlikely that we won't see Lewis at Mercedes in 2021. But what would be interesting to see is who blinks first. Will it be Lewis or will it be Mercedes? The Lewis Mercedes saga is far from over by the looks of it, and there are going to be quite a few more interesting chapters that will unfold in the coming future. What do you guys think? Do let me know in the comment section. Thank you.